So, greetings everybody. I'm Charlie Napier from Atticus Partners. This is James Frith, one of our senior counsel at Atticus Partners. James and I and the rest of the team have just spent a very fine and jolly few days up in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference. And I think it'd be fair to say we and the others both came back feeling pretty pleased with things. Because we're all party members. In particular, James is a former MP for Bury North, and has been reselected again to fight Bury North at the next general election, whenever that may be. Anyway, the point of this podcast really was to give you a bit of a view, some of our thoughts on how we felt the Labour Party conference went, particularly in the context of the extraordinary things that have been happening, caused, dare we say, by the current government. So, James, it was a fun time in Liverpool. What were your overall impressions of how the conference went? Do you think we're on our way to government?
I think we might be, Charlie. Yeah, good to be with you. It was a terrific week in Liverpool. It started very well and it ended very well, which is unlike the usual journey of political conferences. There does tend to be a sort of ebb and flow or an up and down. Actually, I think that even the most critical of observers would acknowledge that the Labour Party had a very good conference. And in fact, some people have said, some writers and observers have said it was probably Labour's best conference since 1996 in terms of from opposition. And I would agree with that as somebody that's been going to Labour conferences for about 20 years now. So yeah, I think we might be, and I think there were a number of standout moments on a daily basis.
What was, well, we won't go through each day, but the absolute highlight for you, what was that really?
Well, I think the Shadow Chancellor and then the leader speech in the successive days on the Monday, Tuesday, I think were definitely the highlights. But those are the biggest set pieces. And I think you have a scenario where, as an alternative to the chaos that was ensuing outside the conference, not within our secure zone, but within the country at large, I think has seen an alternative be given that is a more assured and with an air of confidence and competence. There wasn't complacency. I think there was very serious argument about being sound money, but also understanding what a future Labour government would do for the future of the country, and big ideas. You know, GB Energy was a big idea, investing in new medical workforce for our NHS. And having a credible plan to tackle the cost of living crisis. And I think for a large number of people, particularly in constituencies like mine, where we as a Labour Party, and indeed as the Conservatives would, we rely on people changing their mind at election times. And I think there was enough for that if people are looking at Labour, they will feel more assured. If they need to be inspired. And I think one last point on that, I think there was a keenness to get an emotional connection to voters. I think too often the Labour Party under Keir, which is quite a dry leadership style, has felt a little bit explained to rather than emotionally connected to. And I think that was a step forward, and I was very pleased to be in the hall to hear that.
Good. Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree with you on all of that. And I think for me, you talked about it at the end about Keir's potential ability to be a little dry. I felt that it was the performance of the speech was just miles better than he's ever done before. I've always feared that the problem with Keir was obviously clearly not his ability and his brain and incredibly talented man to become DPP and all the rest, but for a prosecutor, sometimes the way he spoke and so on has been very wooden. And, I was like, crikey, when Liz Truss becomes PM, we've got literally wooden plank versus wooden plank. But all of a sudden, having gone from the sort of very charismatic Boris Johnson versus the wooden Keir, we've gone for a far more charismatic, far more confident Keir to wooden Liz Truss. You only need to listen. We're recording this on Thursday morning. We just heard some of us, Liz Truss, trying to explain to local radio about the sort of market disaster yesterday, and obviously a tricky thing to explain at the best of times, but she, to my mind, is not a great communicator, and all of a sudden we have Keir as potentially the great communicator. And some people are critical about his sort of body movement, say during the conference. I have to say the arms out like this still doesn't quite look right, but I thought the other stuff worked well, and I truly felt that he had this sort of much more magnetic,
somebody said to me after the speech, he drank too much water. I thought, goodness me, I mean, the guy can't do anything.
He can't win. Yeah.
and I think you're right. Look, I mean, but these are serious times, and in response to the Martha Carney interview on Today, when he said, look, I can come on here and tell you I've just done a bungee jump, but you won't then say, oh, we've got the prime minister we now need. These are serious times, and Keir's a serious politician. I think what has lacked today is that sense or that instinctive feel that voters get, because very often, whilst those of us involved in politics, everybody to read chapter and verse of what politicians and politics and political life is about and what we're saying, in truth, very often it's the sort of chapter headings that people decide whether they resonate on or resonate with. And I think the polling beyond the top line is around the issues. Are they going to solve the cost of living crisis? Can they be trusted to do so? Yes. On the economy, yes. On skills and business, yes. On investment in public services, yes. On the NHS, yes. On Brexit, on making Brexit work, suddenly we've got a scenario where people are trusting that as well, because actually, in truth, the sort of best of Brexit battle has yet to be won by even the leavers in government. And of course, we've got a prime minister who was a Remainer anyway now. So I think it's all to play for, Charlie. It's all to play for.
It sounds like you're doing a great job on defending and bigging up the Labour government, or government in waiting. But tell me there's always something that goes wrong. We had maybe a bit of controversy at the beginning over this sort of national anthem stuff, over PR as in proportional representation. And we had the very poor remarks, silly, stupid-headed remarks, frankly, from Rupert Huck at the end, which almost derailed the speech. Firstly, was there anything else you felt that didn't quite work? And secondly,
no, I mean, I think
secondly, why do you think it managed to go smoothly?
I think it was a lesson in taking risks, actually, that you do have to take risks. And it was a risk, I think, for Keir to go for the minute silence, to go for the national anthem. But it was a risk that paid off, because people are in highly respectful mood. Whether we're monarchists or Republicans, I think, have all been affected in the sad passing of HM Elizabeth II. And I think it is a moment that warranted that level of respect. And I think it also is an opportunity for Keir to stamp his seal on the Labour Party, and that carried on through conference, whether that's how local parties have chosen their delegates, whether that's the direction of travel for the vast majority of votes that came to the floor, which we won't get too bogged down on. But it was very much, this is Keir's moment, this is Keir's Labour Party. Stark contrast, I might add, in success and fortune to that which Liz Truss is having. Because this Conservative government is very much Liz Truss's moment, and she, as Rishi Sunak has said, the former Chancellor, he's not going to Birmingham because he wants Liz Truss to own this moment. I think Keir has owned his moment and owns his moment, and Liz Truss is now having to own hers. But on your point about Rupert, that was a stupid and racist thing to say, and no one subscribes to that being the smart way or even the acceptable way to do things. It was again an opportunity to show leadership for Keir in responding very quickly, calling it out for what it was, and removing the whip. And that's a decisive leadership we've seen throughout his 3 years in office.
What's your thought on the kind of the away from the kind of the conference speeches and things, but in the sort of the moods in the bars, the even on the exhibition hall? I mean, I did feel, and we talked already, there's been a big focus in the last few hours about not many Tory MPs going to the Conservative conference, I have to say, I'm not sure there are a huge amount of Labour MPs at the Labour conference. Now, I know that's not unusual, but I just wonder if you know,
I
if you
think.
felt
Well,
that.
I saw loads of. I mean, the PLP were all sat in the back of the hall on a sort of elevated seating area
Yeah,
just to my right. Actually, I was stood up. I got there as the speech was starting, and the shadow cabinet all took the front row.
sure,
So I think
sure.
the PLP were in force. I mean, it's a big old place, the Liverpool conference space. So they were all dispersed, hundreds and hundreds of fringes as well to get to and get involved with. But I thought one of the biggest indications, and of course, this is well before some of the local stuff that we talked about happening in terms of the national anthem on the floor or the responses on the votes and everything else, and the mood is, of course, who commits to go to conference. And we had the busiest sort of corporate and business engagement of a Labour Party conference in well over a decade, as I'm told by people I know within the party. So I think that's a good sign. And actually, from a business organisation, as you and I both know, and the clients that we're working with, the Labour Party leadership and its shadow cabinet talking not just about being pro-business, but being the partner with business and wanting to partner with business. And that was evident on the floor, whether it was the Sainsbury's and the Googles of the world, or the National Farmers Union, or the charitable sector, media, obviously. Great range of media as well. GB News had a station there, Sky, obviously, BBC, etc., and ITV, who I spoke to as well. So, I mean, I think on all indexes, it was about as good as it gets. The challenge here is, of course, to assume that the world's changed just because conference felt good. It hasn't. We go back to the cost of living crisis. We go back to a lot of the heightened anxiety people are facing and feeling. We've got to ensure they hear, for the Labour Party, it's got to ensure that they hear a credible alternative when we speak to them on the doorstep, and that's got to be maintained. It cannot be, oh well, let's ride this out till next year's conference and do it all over again. It is an everyday requirement to keep our foot on the gas, so to speak.
Definitely. Well, expectations are now very high. As a result, that's going to be one of the real challenge. But the polls are amazing at the moment. But I guess the question is, and I won't ask you, I think we'll know your answer here, is the polls reflecting, appalling performance from the Conservative government, or is this a sort of massive Labour bounce? I suspect it's a bit of both.
That is the question. Yeah. And look, I've actually made a lot of that very question when I've been communicating and speaking and writing to residents in Bury North, where I am now, where my family and I live. And that is very much about saying, look, this is not about inheriting the losses or misgivings of the local MP or the local or the Tory government. This is actually offering some level of compulsion or a propulsion, as an alternative government, not just as an opposition, a proposition, not just an opposition. And I think people have got to feel good about that.
Absolutely. And, the only way Tony Blair was so successful was by doing exactly that, despite the fact that Tories had a tricky time in those early 90s. Anyway, James,
absolutely,
we will leave it there. Clearly, a lot of optimism, a lot of, everyone feeling very buoyed by the Labour conference, which is great. We've got lots of colleagues going to the Conservative conference next week, and we'll be watching that very keenly. It'll be very interesting to hear how that pans out and what their views are. So watch this space. But thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to being in touch again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Charlie.
Cheers. Bye-bye.